Boston, the winningest sports city this century. Each championship deriving from a plan. Join us as we discuss the next Boston Banner Blueprint with your hosts, Josh Finkel, Nick Walsh, and Nate Philbrook.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Boston Banner Blueprint podcast. It's episode 2. We're talking Patriots today. But first, I'm going to kick it to Nate. He's got a quick message for us.
What's up, everybody? Wanted to shout out where you can find us for this episode and all of our online content. So follow us on Twitter/X at Boston Banner BP, Instagram and Facebook, Boston Banner Blueprint, Spotify. We're working on Apple. Hopefully that'll be up by the time you listen to this. And of course on YouTube at Boston Banner Blueprint. Now back to Fink.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of Patriots news to jump into. Season that ended yesterday. Thank God. I'm sure we're all thankful that's over. But, I mean, they fired Mayo right after. Obviously, we'll get into that. But let's go right to Nick here. We know Nick's our Patriots guy, so let's see what he's got to say to kick us off.
Well, so where do we begin in a season full of missteps where it's been one embarrassment after another? I was so ready coming into this episode, looking forward to it all week because I had a lot of grievances to get off my chest, specifically at head of the household himself, Robert Kraft. It all starts and ends with him. And if he ever someday listens to this before he's in the grave, because he's 83 years old, as we all know, and if he comes back and listens to this, Robert, you have no one to blame but yourself. This is all on you. This is at your feet, your mess. Started all the way back a year ago, where I think we can all agree that it was time to let Belichick go. The writing was on the wall. You did right there. You got him out of here. But ever since then, you've been tripping over your own 2 feet like you're Brady trying to catch a pass in the Super Bowl. Like, you kick Belichick out the door with the 10-part documentary where you made Belichick a sacrificial lamb. You made him a sympathetic character when you were in the right to let him go. And all of a sudden you got the fan base to turn on you for that. You go on the Brady roast. You're the only one who couldn't take a joke. And you had Brady up there on the hot mic yelling at Jeff Ross to tone it down because he made a joke about you. You bring in Mayo without doing any sort of head coaching search whatsoever when you had the first chance to look outside your organization in 20-something years. And all of that. Oh, by the way, you're still dead last in cash spending. Like, we give John Henry enough crap in this town for not spending money. You're just as bad. And if it wasn't for the greatest coach and the greatest quarterback of all time saving your behind and covering that up for you, your wallet is almost as dusty as you are at this stage of your life. So, do you get credit for seeing your mistake and rectifying it within 90 minutes of the season ending?
Yes.
Sure. Well,
yes.
Yeah. Well, bravo. You have
Round
made
of
your
applause
mistake.
for Mr. Kraft. Round of applause, Mr. Kraft.
But you don't get credit for kicking the circus out of town when you're the one who invited the clown show in to begin with. So, that's the long way of saying, bravo, you rectified the mistake, but you're not even close to being out of the woods yet.
I think this is a pretty hot start to episode number 2. I know our first episode, I think, did better than at least I anticipated. So thank you all for listening along and watching us on YouTube. But it might be a stretch to get RKK to watch our show at this point. So I mean, it's a good
producer Tony, book Robert Kraft to come on for Nick. We're just going to do a one-on-one pod, Nick and Robert Kraft. Book that, please.
Because we all know that PT's got his the direct line to RKK. So, and I think that, you know, while I agree with you on all of those points, it's certainly in the avoidable or unavoidable mistakes that can be made. The only thing that we know that for sure is that Robert Kraft is not going to fire himself. There's lots of decisions to be made. There's lots of things that we anticipate coming down the pipe. with just the start of the offseason really today, but we know that Robert Kraft's going to be sticking around as owner of the Patriots, and rightfully so. I mean, he's done this team and this city justice by for a lot of years in a lot of different ways. So I hear you, Nick, but RKK's maybe not the sole loser in this case.
Yeah, I agree with that last take, Nate. I think he's taken the right steps since the season's ended. We saw his comments today. He said, they asked him if spending money on coaches will limit money in free agency. He said no. He wants to. They got Ben Johnson to accept an interview, and obviously there's interest with Vrabel. So I think there's a spot to be hopeful. So, and they got 130 million in cap.
Okay, so I'll throw this at you. What talk is cheap. Like, we give John Henry and the Red Sox ownership enough grief for saying, oh, we're going to spend to the tax line. We're going to go over the tax. And they never do. Or at least the
last 3 years they haven't since
right.
21.
The last 5 years, the Patriots are dead last or near dead last in the league in cash spending. Why doesn't Kraft get that same treatment?
It's not like they didn't try. In the last offseason, they tried to give Calvin Ridley the bag, and he just said no. And rightfully so. There wasn't a whole lot here for him. I mean, was he going to have, at that point, I don't know if they'd traded Mac yet, but was he going to have Mac Jones throwing the ball or an unknown quarterback in the draft? Now that I think that Drake May's, leading the way on offense, there might be some opportunities for free agents to view this as a more attractive destination.
And I hear you there, but we didn't give John Henry credit for throwing a $300 million offer at Yamamoto last year. So when did we start giving points for trying to throw money out there and not getting the deal done?
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point was that Yamamoto got more elsewhere. Calvin Ridley accepted a lesser deal elsewhere to not be in New England. And so that's where I think he still put his best foot forward of trying to give him the bag, and he gave him the highest offer. You can't do anything about somebody picking somewhere else.
That's a good point. And they did spend money, like before Mac Jones' rookie year. They brought in Judon, Henry, Bourne. Obviously, didn't all work out, but they did spend some money. Jonnu Smith, that was awesome. Good for him. Got some money from us doing nothing.
I was about to say, I can sense the sarcasm there.
Yeah,
for
Jonnu.
So, I mean, before we get into true off-season spending, because that's a pretty slippery slope, let's get back to the actual breaking news. Not so breaking at this point, but moving on from head coach Jerod Mayo after just one season. He was the heir apparent to Bill Belichick for what we found out a little after the hiring for 5 years leading up to his hiring. And so I think that, everybody saw this guy. He was an amazing Patriots player, Patriot Hall of Famer, a guy that you wanted to rally behind, had the locker room support at least early on. And so it was a guy that was handpicked by Robert Kraft. And so for all the things that went wrong during that process, I think we were all at least hopeful that it was going to be a new regime in New England that Jerod was bringing. And I think that, was it 1 year? Yes. Did any of us expect the team to be good? At least personally, no. But what I did expect is them to start building some sort of building blocks or platform for them to start accelerating. Wanted to be better at the end of the season than they were at the beginning. And I don't think that happened.
I expected at least 1% better every week. And the opening week Bengals game, you get a win. It's like they kind of set an identity. It's like take them to the hill. It's awesome. They're I'm all right, let's go. Maybe we're onto something. And it's holding penalty after holding penalty after not getting better, after not being prepared. And it's just a step back every single week. And I don't even know. I had his back in the beginning.
Even during the game, right? That you would expect every season with Belichick that even if the first half was ugly, it didn't look great, you would expect that coming out of the second half that the team would be in a better position to win in the second half than they were the first. I can't recall a single game this season that I felt comfortable or confident that Mayo had prepared the team at halftime to make those in-game adjustments that we had been accustomed to for 20 years. And so to me, that's a sign of a true coach, is identifying what's going on in the game, making the adjustments, and then putting the team in position for success. Obviously, he's not the one that's playing, but he can prepare his players, and that's not what I saw happening.
There was
the preparation was nil.
No preparation at all.
And Fink, you kind of hit on it speaking about the Bengals game. Kraft did mention that in his press conference this morning, where the high mark of the season was that Bengals game, week 1. And with a rookie head coach and the roster the way it was, yes, that roster was not meant to make it to the playoffs. We know that. And last year, with the greatest coach of all time, they win 4 games. So it wasn't the fact that they only won 4 games this year that he got done. It was the high water mark of the year was week 1. It progressively got worse. There was nothing to look forward to where you can identify and say he made such and such part of the team better. The guy was a defensive standout as a player, was a defensive assistant coach, coaching middle linebackers. You inherited a statistically top 10 defense. And we can talk about losing Barmore, losing Peppers, losing Bentley. And those aren't small names to lose. Like, it's going to take a hit. But you go from top 10 to what was the end of the year, 27th, 28th, and you're the defensive guy? Like, this isn't even getting into all the misquotes and missteps at the podium and looking like an embarrassment to the organization. Hey, we're going to start Gibson. We're going to bench Stevenson because of his fumble issues. Who's out there? Snap number 1? Oh, Stevenson. Well, how did that change in the last half hour, Jerod?
Yeah, and I think that's where the biggest issue was on the field. There was statistical things that you could have to back up what was wrong with both sides of the ball, just the team in general. But the misquotes, the misspeaking at the podium, the saying things one day and then retracting it the next day. You had 5 years under the greatest head coach of all time to learn how to communicate to the media. And clearly that didn't sink in. And so that's another area that you would expect to see some improvement throughout the year, personal improvement for him. He just didn't see it.
It's not
it
even
wasn't just 5 years too. He had what,
he had
9 years as a player under Belichick too.
He also had 5 years to prepare to be a head coach, and it looked like he didn't do a lick of homework at all. Like, could have done some work a month before too, and it probably would have panned out better than it did. Like, I don't know what vision Kraft saw when they were in Israel together, but I hope he never sees that image again. I don't know what could have happened that was like, yeah, this guy, he can lead men. I want him leading my football team.
Right. And we're bashing Mayo pretty hard right now, and rightfully so. He didn't do much to help himself. But also, I don't blame Mayo for this mess. Like, any one of us, if we were offered a big job promotion, we're not turning it down. So why should he be turned down, even if he knew he wasn't ready? This is why I go back to this is on Kraft, and at least Kraft did say today that he did not put Mayo in a position to succeed.
He still had the 5 years to prepare. So it's not like he knew. It's not like Kraft held it from him. He probably was like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Like, people know that.
Where I will agree with you, Nick, is putting him in position for success. You have a first-time GM, a first-time head coach, a first-time offensive coordinator, a first-time defensive coordinator, and you say, go be great with a 4-13 team from the year prior. That's not a recipe for success, but where I think that it's easier to identify why and it's easier to move on from a guy like Jerod Mayo is you would expect that week after week growth that we did not see. And so there's
absolutely.
Culture there.
Let me ask you guys this
100%
question.
Agree.
Let me ask you this question. When do you think he lost the job? Like, not necessarily like what do you think in the season was Kraft kind of made up his mind that he's like, all right, like this probably is not our guy? Do you think it was right after Sunday, like right after yesterday?
No, that's the statement that he released. Tells me that it wasn't right after the game. It was prior to the game that it was the decision was already made. Like Schefter at 11:30 goes out on TV said. But to answer your original question of when do you think Kraft made up his mind, I'm not 100% sure on that. I can probably guess that the seed of doubt where he starts thinking that it's a possibility has to be coming out of the bye week out in Arizona, seeing how unprepared they were. So that was probably where he starts thinking, okay, you had, especially after the debacle at the end of the Colts game where you didn't know to take timeouts or not, or anything like that, is one thing in itself. But then you got 2 weeks to prepare for an Arizona team that's really not all that good. All you really had to do was push on them a little bit and they would have fallen. And you come out the way you did. To me, that's when you have to at least start taking a hard look at what's going on. I don't know. I doubt the decision was made that day, but the thought of it probably started that day.
That's my answer too. Is after the bye week with Arizona, it was a completely non-competitive game. That was a winnable game if you compare the rosters. And again, that's just the common theme is it comes down to preparation. I don't think that the team was prepared. I don't think the game plan was very good. And that's ultimately what the head coach's job is to prepare and to unite his team around a common goal that I don't think was shared in the locker room.
That was also my answer, so I'm glad we all agree.
Great minds. Yeah. You know what they say. Yeah. Great minds think alike.
And it probably didn't help. It probably didn't help this past week too, where you have players coming out and openly bashing the fans too for expecting them to play better. Like that couldn't have set well with Robert and Jonathan either, where you have Giovanni Tavai coming out saying,
why is he even the one saying anything? He took such a step back this year. He's a Belichick warrior, and he's yelling at the fans.
Right.
Well, so he was taken out of position again this year. His first year with Belichick, he was horrendous, and he was playing the same position he was this year. So with the loss of Bentley, having to move back inside, he wasn't very good. So he wasn't set up for success either. But again, that comes down to roster construction of you shouldn't be reliant on one veteran linebacker to hold the defense together. But yeah, Jelani Tavai needs to keep his mouth shut. That goes back to the comments that we made last week of us as fans are pay good money to watch this team to be entertained, and that is the last thing that we were done that we were this season was entertained.
Right, and if that's the culture inside the locker room where players feel like they can go out and say those words that fans need to know their place, what was the coach doing to influence that sort of structure? And I'm blanking here on words at the worst possible time, but that comes back to the coach and the foundation he's setting in the locker room, that players feel empowered to be able to do that. And I think if Robert didn't take a hard look at that during the week, Jonathan did.
Well, sitting up in there in the owner's box too, watching your team win the last week and have your fans at home boo that you're winning, that can't send a message of positivity and say, hey, yeah, we want this guy coming back leading our team. Simple. But moving on from all the negative things that we can say about Mayo, let's talk a little bit about the other branches of his coaching staff. And so what do you guys think about Covington and AVP?
Covington sucks. I think Van Pelt, he was solid for what he was given. I think at times play calling was questionable, but I think for what he had, and I think he did a solid job. But it's tough to move the ball with that offensive line and what we had on the outside. Like Booty was our most productive guy, so, and not taking anything away from Booty. He played his booty off, so like, you see what I did there, Nick? You can laugh. It's okay. Anyway, take it away. I was
going to say, out of the three major coaches on the staff, the head coach and the two coordinators, the best one out of the year that can at least go into job interviews next year and say, look what I was able to do with what I had, I think is Alex Van Pelt. Like, yes, the play calling at times, once the first two drives, when they got off that out of the locker room script of what you were going to run, got a little shaky. But look at the development of Drake May. Look
and
at
Joe
Sunday.
Milton and Joe Milton.
I was just about to say the development of Joe Milton is a huge tip to the cap of Alex Van Pelt when he goes into job interviews next year. So
and what's his name? Is it Ben McAdoo or Bob McAdoo? I think he was like
Ben McAdoo.
Ben. Yeah. Not great with the B names.
yeah, but so Van Pelt gets. If you're grading on it, I'd say you give him a C plus B minus, where the other two get straight Fs. Where at least Van Pelt got the major part.
Sucks.
Yeah,
They
but
suck.
Van Pelt gets the credit for he got the biggest part of his job this year, the biggest goal correct, and developing Drake May into what looks to be like a bright future and a bright career.
Yeah, and I think that was his primary focus coming into the year was development of Drake May, to see what you had and see what you had in weapons outside of Drake. And I think it's probably pretty fair to say that we don't have a whole lot. Ramondre was at the top of the league in fumbles. I understand he was running behind a bad offensive line, but you still got to be able to hold on to the ball. Even if you're taking shots for losses, you still got to hold on to the ball, because turnovers are an easy way to lose a game. And then, weapons on the outside. Hooper wasn't super productive. Hunter Henry had the best season of his career. And so I think it's fair to say that veteran presence was a calming sense for Drake. And so something that he certainly leaned on, particularly in moments when you got to have it type moments. But to your point, I think Booty certainly he shined. Kendrick Bourne coming back from his knee injury was not very productive. Demario Douglas, the small, shifty guy that you expected a guy like Drake to be able to hit down the middle, because he had a guy like that in North Carolina and Josh Downs. But he was, I would say, underwhelming. He's one of the better guys in that room, but he never really had that explosive game that you're like, wow, Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, he's arrived. He belongs. Not saying he doesn't belong, but I'm just saying that as our top option, that's certainly not a blueprint for success.
No, and I think for Pop, it's like where he's going to shine is when he's the number 3 guy on the depth chart. He's the number 3 guy out on the field. He can't be your number 1. Very few slot guys can be your number 1.
He's a perfect guy to create mismatches, right? If you can get him inside on a linebacker, he's a guy that's going to be able to shift the linebacker out of his shoes. And so you got to be able to create those matchups, but you need somebody on the outside to be able to create the matchups.
And we watched that for 20 years from Troy Brown to Wes Welker to obviously Julian Edelman. We've seen the slot receivers have a career, and in terms of Edelman and Welker, borderline Hall of Fame careers. Let's be realistic. Like, neither one will probably get in at the end of the day, but as a slot receiver, you're borderline Hall of Famer in New England. Like, we've seen that. So for Pop, like, I'm not saying he's going to reach Welker and Edelman levels, but it can be done in terms of having success as a slot receiver, as a small, shifty guy.
Kind of like yourself, Nick. Small, shifty guy.
I'm small, but I'm not that shifty.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think that it was a large success in the development of Drake May. We know that we have a guy that we can really get behind, and that can attract those superstar A-list type guys to New England. I think it's fair to say, from what we saw in Week 18 with Joe Milton, we might have an asset there that's either tradable or certainly feel comfortable about bringing him in as the backup, particularly with the play style that it's reminiscent of Drake May. It certainly worries me with a Cam Newton style of offense getting hurt or doing a backflip or something stupid like that. But I don't know if you guys saw too that Joe Milton standing next to other grown ass men on the football field. He's a big fucking dude. He is massive. Yeah. And so I feel pretty confident that him or an Anthony Richardson type can take a hit or two. Hopefully, he's better at it than Anthony Richardson. But
Anthony Richardson's made of glass.
Yeah,
and I think Milton showed that he has better accuracy in throwing the football than Anthony Richardson did.
Yeah. And just as hard too. He had the second hardest thrown ball in StatCast history behind Jordan Love that also threw it earlier this year. So he threw the football that one play into the corner of the end zone that ended up getting taken back, but it was an over 61 mile an hour football throw. I mean, that's just absurd. So all that to say, I brought that up to wrap that thought up of we have some pieces on the offensive side that are at least somewhat attractive. And so it's a matter of what do we do next? That's obviously the most important in terms of building blocks. And so we have a pretty clear vacancy at the top with Jerod Mayo now exiting. Where do you guys see us shifting from here on out to kind of start our new blueprint?
I think you kind of have to start with the obvious two names. Like, I think the top two guys on probably any head coaching vacancy is Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson. So I think it starts and ends there. I don't think it. Look, with the Rooney Rule and I was going to say with the Rooney Rule, it's going to be an actual process this time around. We're going to get multiple interviews. We're going to hear a lot of names in the coming days other than those two. But let's be realistic. It's probably going to be either Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. My preference, I would lean Mike Vrabel. Nothing against Ben Johnson, but I think you need a guy in here that's going to be able to set a culture and has done the job before. I don't think you're firing a rookie head coach in Mayo to bring in another rookie head coach in Ben Johnson, no matter how much more experience Johnson's had as a coordinator and how successful he's been in Detroit. I think Kraft is going to lean towards give me a guy with experience this time, because let's face it, before Mayo, the last two head coaches that he brought in had head coaching experience and are going to go to Canton in the Hall of Fame, and Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick. So I have a feeling it's going to be Vrabel just because of the previous experience in Tennessee.
I would like to see them interview Ben Johnson and then Bill Belichick, just the coach, not the GM, just the coach.
I hate to break it to you, think that ain't happening.
you never know. You never know. But that's my wish list. But obviously, it's Vrabel or Johnson. I agree with most of what you said about Vrabel, why they would hire him. It's just, do you think they hire another ex-Patriot guy, or do they go away from, obviously, like, he's years removed from his Patriot days. He was decent. He was decent in Tennessee. I'm not going to say he was great. They ranked at the bottom of the league in passing pretty much every year he was there. I think they peaked at like 22nd. So, like,
yeah, Ryan Tannehill. Yeah, so there's the combo right there. You had Ryan Tannehill.
Chill on Ryan Tannehill. Hey, I'm not the biggest Vrabel guy. Ryan Tannehill is on my.
So then, what's the Ben Johnson argument?
UNC guy, he knows offense. We just had a defensive-minded coach. It didn't work out. It's an offensive-driven league now, and we see what Ben Johnson does. He's as crafty as they come. He can cook up anything. I mean, a fake fumble for crying out loud, and Sam Laporta is just hanging out in the end zone. Like, if we win 5 games, I don't care, because Drake May would ball out with him. So, I mean, it'd be awesome to watch Drake May in that offense. I don't really want to watch Drake May hand it off to Ramondre 42 times a game. So,
do either of you guys have any candidates outside of those two that you're keeping your eye on?
Honestly, the spotlight has been on those two the whole time. For me, it's been what I'm keeping my eyes out on is who's the offensive coordinator going to be. Like, to me, that is more of an exciting thing to look for to me, because that's going to directly impact Drake May the most. Because the thought behind Ben Johnson is you get that offensive head coach. You don't have to worry about an offensive coordinator leaving once he has success with Drake May for a head coaching job, and you run into the same situation you had with Mac, where all of a sudden the first 3 years you run through 3 different coordinators. So that's the appeal of Ben Johnson. For me, in terms of my outside candidates, this is going to probably sound a little boring because I'm a Vrabel guy for a head coach and ex-Patriot player. I kind of would like to see them bring back Josh McDaniels as OC, simply because he isn't leaving. He's already gotten his 2 cracks at being a head coach. You ain't getting a third. So that safety net of you don't have to worry about him leaving Drake May once he gets success. I think that's the biggest appeal for me.
That's the tiebreaker for me is Vrabel and McDaniels were already linked to the New England job. And so that clear path to having a guy that has not necessarily developed Brady, obviously, as he came while Brady was an established superstar, but has that winning mentality and winning preparation style that I think would pair really, really nicely. And so this year, if we look at what Kraft and Elliott Wolf kind of built, was you had your head coach that was more defensive minded, and so that would be replaced with Vrabel. And then you had the head coach of offense, right, with AVP. And so if that's then Josh McDaniels, sign me up, because those offensive has been proven to work. Head coach, not so much, but as an offensive coordinator, he's proven to do well. And so I think that's the tiebreaker for me, because I'm with you. Think that the UNC connection is interesting, as Ben Johnson was a backup quarterback for the Tar Heels back in the day. He got his first he got his first coaching job in football with Boston College. And so he does have some New England ties there, but I think the tiebreaker to me is the assumed offensive coordinator pick with Vrabel coming to town.
What would you do at DC, defensive coordinator? I have my answer. Robert Saleh. That's a guy I would be interested in. I don't know how likely that would be, but that would. If you get Vrabel, a good coordinator, McDaniels would be great, and then Saleh. That's 3 pretty decent coaches.
Hey, this is a chance for me to plug my grievances at Kraft once again, where Kraft is cheap in terms of paying coaches. We've seen in the past, which he's still got to pay off Belichick's contract. He's going to have to pay out Mayo's $10 million contract. So he's not going to pay too much probably out after the head coach. Who's paying Robert Saleh right now? The New York Jets. So Kraft wouldn't have to really pay Saleh all too much. So for me, in terms of being realistic and what the backbone of the blueprint of Kraft's history of being cheap when it comes to paying coaching staffs, Saleh is the guy.
And let's be honest, unless we're talking about Steve Cohen for the Mets, like, billionaires like to be cheap. And so, let's get another billionaire to pay so that this billionaire doesn't have to, right? And so I think that just adds to that Patriots-Jets rivalry, two shit franchises right now. But you get Woody Johnson to pay most of Robert Saleh, and I think that's a great pull, Fink. I would love that situation. Obviously, leadership skills, obviously a defensive-minded guy, and he's a up-the-middle first strong defensive guy, which obviously was the weakest part of this of this defense this year. Now, granted, Barmore coming back would help alleviate that big way, but we hope that he comes back healthy and can have some sustainable minutes there. But I think Saleh would be a fantastic fit. And Bentley. So one thing that I think a lot of Patriot fans fall into a trap is wanting Brian Flores as their DC. And so if you're looking at and you're comparing opportunities, why in the hell would Brian Flores ever leave Minnesota to come to New England? I don't see that fit there, simply from an attraction standpoint. For all the good things that we just talked about, May setting up the offensive side, there's really not a whole lot on the defensive side. Barmore's a stud, Gonzo's a stud, but it's a whole different framework, as there isn't that quarterback on the defensive side of the ball that gets to lead in the same way. So I don't see the Flores fit solely from a interest perspective. I think he would be a great addition. He's been a proven leader of men on the defensive side, but I don't know if that's the case here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then 2 of the candidates just to throw out there, Cliff Kingsbury and Aaron Glenn. I know Clint Kingsbury has the interest in the Bears job, pair back up with Williams, and then Aaron Glenn, Lions DC. I don't see either of those happening here, so probably just put an X right on those names.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see for all the reasons that Nick just said about moving from a first-time head coach to a first-time head coach. I don't think Aaron Glenn's the guy for New England. But what do you guys think about? So obviously they win on Sunday in Week 18 to lose the number 1 overall pick in this upcoming draft. We fall from 1 to 4. Let's talk about some potential options there. What we think is gonna happen.
I think it might have been a blessing in disguise, honestly, because I think if we had one, you're probably trading down. They definitely would have messed that up. There's no way. There's no doubt about it in my mind. They find a way to mess it up. It's what they do. They said it today. Their drafts haven't been well. Like, they would definitely mess that up. So being at 4 might just be where we need to be. That might be better for us.
Well, yes, the draft. Yeah, I was going to say the drafts in recent years haven't, as a whole, haven't been great. But the last 2 first-round draft picks they've nailed in terms of Christian Gonzalez.
No doubt.
So what going from 1 to 4 does is, if they would have had the number 1 pick, I don't think anyone would disagree that they're trading it. They were not going to pick at 1. So
you don't want Travis Hunter?
What? Well, I'm not to be honest with you, I'm not a Travis Hunter guy. Like, I understand the appeal, the two-way player type of thing, but is he worthy of a top 1, top 3 pick as a wide receiver alone or a cornerback alone? Probably not, because once he gets to the NFL, he's not playing both. Maybe in spurts, he might be like the Marcus Jones of offense or defense, where you plug and play him.
He would be who Marcus Jones thinks Marcus Jones is, I think.
But so what moving from 1 to 4 does is, any asset that you would have received from trading the first round pick, you just lost. If you're going from 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 or whatever the case may be, those extra assets with a team with this many holes that need to be filled, that is the mistake of winning on Sunday. In the obviously the con of dropping 1 to 4, it's not that you're getting a different player, it's you're not getting as many players, as many pieces.
Well, yeah. But, like, back to what I was saying that they would mess up that trade. The trading number 1, they would probably do it wrong. They would accidentally take a team's bunch of, like, 6-round picks on accident and be like, oh, whoops, didn't see that there, my bad.
Got tremendous value.
Got 6 picks back. They're all 6-rounders.
That's where I think that, if they were forced to pick at their allotted draft selection, I think that moving from 1 to 4 does not change the player in which they were going to pick. So that's where I think that it's a benefit that they drop back. But to your point, Nick, that's where the draft capital and the trade value of number 1 to 4 is so dramatically different that it does hurt because of the amount of holes that need to be filled from a defensive line standpoint, an offensive line standpoint, a weapon standpoint, a complement to Gonzo on the outside to be able to cover more than 2 receivers, because Gonzo covers basically 2 receivers at a time. And so being able to plug and play a lot of those players, and that's where we did kind of skip over this part of Elliott Wolf's job security, but his last draft, I think we all can agree, jury's still out on some. It was amazing. Horrible. It was horrible. And so particularly, you just laser in on week 17 and you look at the comparison of Jalen Polk to Lab McConkey that you traded out of the pick with the Chargers that ended up being Lab McConkey. And then you have Jalen Polk that put up literally half the amount of receiving yards for his entire rookie season that Lab McConkey put up on us on 1 game. That was the perfect comparison to look at the inept ability to identify and draft talent. It was a terrible draft class, but not a new thing in New England. I think that we had talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but since 2014, Nick, that They had the lowest amount of draftees selected to the Pro Bowl out of 32
3%.
teams. They had 3% of their draftees drafted to or selected to the Pro Bowl. Yuck. I mean, come on.
And one of those 3% was Mac in his rookie year, where he was a fill-in because of a couple COVID.
He hit the gritty though, so he did hit the gritty. So give him some credit. And
So
also,
really,
I think Jalen Polk is a great player.
But if you and he may still be. I think that the jury's still out. He looked horrible this year. He didn't look like he was able to.
We drafted Washington's number 2. I don't know what they're expecting. We drafted Washington.
Well, yeah, but even if you look at Washington's number 3, Jalen McMillan has had an amazing rookie season in Tampa.
That's also true.
He's been the guy.
It is weird because it is weird because Polk didn't drop the ball in college, made all these contested catches, caught everything. Comes here and it's like, I don't know. It's like they threw Nick out there. Maybe we're doing the podcast with Jalen Polk right now. I don't know, but it is. I don't know what happened.
Nate, to go back to your point about the drafting of the Pro Bowls, go even more. When was the last time they drafted an All-Pro? You got to go all the way back to Dante Hightower and Devin McCourty's draft year. That's what, 2010? Was that their rookie year? 2009 or 2010? So you're going back 15 years since they've even drafted an All-Pro, let alone a Pro Bowl. Like, yes, Pro Bowls are easier to come by than All-Pros, but at least you had some Pro Bowlers, Mac Jones being one of them, which I put an asterisk next to, of course. But to go 15 years, basically.
Enough with the Mac Jones hate. I won't stand for it.
So let's
15 years without getting a blue chip talent in here from the draft, basically, is the point being made.
I mean, and going like back to Polk training camp, he was a standout. Every report you saw was, Jalen Polk, he's playing well. He's why they drafted him, yada, yada, yada. Whole lot of bullshit. Excuse my French, Walsh. I know you hate swearing for some reason. But, like, it just – I don't know what happened to him. Like, he regressed somehow. And I think it goes back to we don't develop, like you're saying, Walsh, at all. Like, guys got worse this year. Kyle Duggar was awful. Like, everything was awful. Ramondre, I don't even know what he was doing. He was like a traffic cone back there.
You look at the 2 extensions they signed. Ramondre and Kyle Duggar both signed extensions this offseason, and then were absolute garbage this year. So, again, that goes back to Elliott Wolf identifying talent and locking in talent. So, to me, I mean, I don't necessarily think that Elliott Wolf's job should have been safe, and I guess it's still a little bit too early to tell. One would have hoped that if he was on the way out, that he would have been on the way out with Mayo. But I think that, being able to identify talent as a general manager in any sport is the number one job. And he was, not only did he get one shot, but he got they had 6-8 draft picks this year. And then he signed 4 or 5 free agents, that one of which finished the season with the actual team. I mean, one of the guys literally stopped playing, said, I don't want to play football anymore.
12 snaps into the season. 12 snaps into the season, he retired.
Hey, he knew what he wanted. He knew he did not want to be here, so can't blame him. He got out before everyone else should have got out too.
So the way the year went, maybe Okafor was actually the smartest guy in the room getting out before all this happened. He saw the writing on the wall.
I think before we jump right into Wolf, could we stay on the draft a little bit? Because we didn't really talk about what we want to do with the pick, like if we would move it, who we would take. Like, they'll talk a little bit about that. I don't care who starts it.
I was going to say, I think we'll know. I think this is where I like where the NFL has it set up, where free agency comes first. We'll know more what their plan is after free agency. Like, if they go out and sign T. Higgins and another number 2 wide receiver, they're not taking a wide receiver in the first round. If they go out and sign one of the big tackles on the market, if it's Stanley or if it's Robinson, they're not going to take a tackle, vice versa. So in terms of the draft pick, depending on what they do in free agency, I think it comes down to 4 players. You got the 2 tackles in Banks and Campbell. You got Carter out of Penn State, and then you got McMillan out of is it Arizona?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I mean, you should add Travis to that list. Like, it's probably a list of 5, for being honest.
See,
So
I refuse to let myself believe it's going to be Travis Hunter. But that's
I don't
just
know, man. Travis' generation.
I'm out on Travis Hunter too, because he's trying to be the Ohtani of football, and it's just humanly impossible to be able to hit grown men and then be hit by grown men over and over and over again and expect to be able to continue to get up. And so I don't think he's worthy of a top 4 pick at wide receiver or at cornerback. It's his versatility that makes him so special. And so because versatility is his number 1 attribute, I don't see him as the guy that changes the direction in either on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball. So I'm with you, Nick, that those 4 players you identified are really the only 4 that I'm paying attention to at number 4.
I'll throw another one. Will
Is on
Johnson.
the table.
Will Johnson from Michigan, cornerback.
So yeah, I did see that in the Bleacher Report mock draft today. So
I really like Johnson. They say people have said he's the best corner in the nation. Pair him up with Gonzo. I mean, I bet you probably don't take him at 4. You could probably trade back, because it's probably going to be 3 QBs off the board early, right? Like, all 3 of those teams need a quarterback.
I think the first 3 picks are going to be in any of this. I'm not saying it's going to be specifically this order. I think it's just going to be these 3 guys. It's going to be Cam Ward, it's going to be Sanders, and it's going to be Hunter. And I think we're going to have the pick of the litter at 4 if we stay there. I don't think all 3 quarterbacks are going top 3. I think Hunter does go in one of those picks. I just hope he doesn't fall to New England at 4, because I don't want them to feel the pressure of taking him.
I agree with I would agree with the list. I would just add Johnson to it. I really like McMillan, but like you said, if you sign Higgins, you're probably not getting McMillan. You can also throw a bag at Chris Godwin. Pretty sure he's a free agent. Not exactly.
He is, but he's coming off
dislocated ankle.
Yeah, so I don't care.
After 2 years ago having the ACL, so it's like.
And also Tyreek Hill is on the market, so there's a lot of.
No,
I don't know.
Nope, out, nope. Don't. I'm not even going to give you
guy. That's the guy.
No.
So here we go, Nick. This is our debate right here. Tyreek is exactly what you're looking for. He's that veteran presence on the outside. He can
a guy
blow the
who
roof
quits on the
off
team.
The offense.
I wouldn't want to play with Tua turn the ball over either. Would you?
Right. Tua's literally got much.
He didn't want to
even prevent it.
Would you play for Mike McDaniel? Dude hits a vape on the sideline, wears flip flops around. Like, would you play for him? Talk about
he didn't want to play for Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's going to quit on you eventually. I don't.
He wanted to be the guy and get paid.
For 2-3 years,
he was the guy and got paid.
I'm out on Tyreek.
Him as a player is exactly what you're looking for. He's a guy that has sure hands. He can take advantage of May's rocket arm, and he can blow the roof off of the offense. A Tyreek Hill in New England would look similar to a Jamar Chase in this year's Bengals offense. Oh, and Nick's gone.
He did not like the Tyreek talk. He is gone.
We didn't like the Tyreek talk.
That is awesome. I'm waiting for a text from him. But, I mean, I guess since Nick's gone, I probably wouldn't want Tyreek either, not going to lie. Like,
everything. Tell me what.
Everything you said is I agree with. It's just he's gonna quit on you. He's a diva. He's just not what you saw. I don't want to compare him to Antonio Brown, but like they kind of act the same. Like,
sure,
you don't need that in New England. It's not the Patriot way. It's team, and it's for Tyreek. It's me. Like, you see his first year in Miami, it's a career year. Last year, pretty good year. This year, Tua gets hurt. Oh, Nick's back. Tua gets hurt, and then it's like, oh, right when something gets bad, he's out of there. Like, he comes here, you're not going to win in year one. So, like, I would be 50-50. I think I would stay neutral until I see how it pans out, honestly, because it would be tough to tell. If you get him here, though, him and May, and maybe someone else, like maybe then you do draft McMillan, so you have that bigger target on the outside, and then you have some speed underneath. So maybe that is a route they
So
could
the only
go.
thing I will say is probably for Tyreek, the lady situation in Foxborough is probably not as good as Miami. So
That might be good for him.
He might have to focus a little bit more on football, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
It's a good point.
But
Like,
I will say, would you guys rather have trade for Tyreek Hill or sign T. Higgins?
Sign T. Higgins.
Sign T. Higgins.
See,
Younger.
I'm trade for Tyreek.
No,
I'd rather have Tyreek. There's been 2 contract years in a row that T. Higgins hasn't been able to stay on the field, and you see from every single report every week coming out of practice that he's been limited. Sure, he still plays, but I feel like you need a consistent guy to be the number one, and T. Higgins doesn't have to be the number one in his own offense, and so therefore he's not the alpha that Tyreek is.
But to me, it comes down to what you're giving up to what you're bringing in. For T. Higgins, the only asset you're giving up is cap space, which you have plenty of.
I mean, for Tyreek, it'd be draft picks, and we don't draft.
Yeah, it would be.
But you just lost. You just
out.
Yeah,
but you just lost some extra draft capital on Sunday from going from 1 to 4, as we've already discussed.
But we also added some with Uche and Judon being moved. We added a third from the Judon trade.
Yeah.
Which that was the best Elliott Wolf move he made.
I mean, moving Uche too probably was too, because at least you got value from him, because he was awful, and he's awful with the Chiefs too. And I mean, if you're bad with the Chiefs,
I think third round pick for Matthew Judon, I thought was
no, I agree too. I just think he did make some solid moves in the season, but I think before you left, what were we talking about? Still Tyreek? Yeah, that's right. All right, so we're on the right track here. I think there's just a lot of ways they can go, and I think, like you said, Nick, once free agency happens and we kind of see what they do there, then we'll have a better guess at what's going to happen during the draft. And I honestly see them staying at 4 and taking, obviously, whoever they want. So I just hope it's not like a tackle, because that would just be boring.
So Fink, what's they stay at 4? What's your top pick? Like, who do you want them to pick at number 4?
McMillan. Go back and watch Travis Hunter versus McMillan, Arizona versus Colorado. McMillan won every single rep versus Travis Hunter. He just didn't get the ball thrown anywhere near him because the Arizona quarterback was awful. Go back and watch it. We'll put it on our socials, and that'll tell you everything you need to know about McMillan. That's what I would take.
Nick?
Can I put a little bit of an asterisk next to this? Because
no, you need to stand by your takes, Nick.
Oh, no, I'll stand by it.
You've already given out your asterisk to Mac Jones's Pro Bowl. You can't have another one this episode. You get one an episode.
Kevin Banks, out of Texas, Jesus. Left tackle.
Why?
What scared?
Because he's hurt. Asterisk.
Kelvin,
you don't even know his name. You're muted. You're muted.
I missed him.
Nick's muted. All right, Nick's muted.
So,
all right,
he is muted. He doesn't know it. There we go.
No, he's back now. 10-second mute.
You were muted.
He's back. Wait, now he's frozen. Oh wait, no, he's not. Okay, go, Nick.
Are you done interrupting me, Fink?
Do you want to get muted again?
No, but for me with Banks,
Ouch.
What doesn't concern me is the talent. I think he's the best offensive lineman in this draft, and fat men win football games. Sorry, Fink. It's the guys up front on both ends of the ball. It's the trenches that still win in this league, and you need fat men to be successful no matter what. He's the best fat man in the draft. What scares me is every time I turned on a Texas football game this year, and I watched a good portion of them, it seemed like every other game he was getting hurt. So that's what scares me. Like that regular season game against Georgia, I was so looking forward to turning it on. And what was it, in the second quarter? He's out for the rest of the game. You couldn't see him go up against the top talent in the conference.
He didn't even play that game, right?
I thought he got it, or maybe it was the game before he got hurt. I'm thinking of, and you still didn't get to see him in Georgia. Point being is he was injury prone all year. So that's what scares me with Banks. It's not the talent, it's the durability.
What do you think's the most likely scenario? They throw a bag at T. Higgins and draft a fat man, like you're saying, or they throw the bag at a couple fat guys in the free agency and draft McMillan? What
I
could you
think
see the more likely scenario? And I'll give you
I
my
think
answer at
both
the end, obviously. And my answer is
I
the
th-
right one, just so you know.
I think both options are on the table. Like I think they're going to offer the bag at if they're going to offer the bag at Calvin Ridley last year, they're going to offer the bag at T Higgins.
Oh, no
this
doubt about that in my mind.
So-
They definitely will.
So I think they're going to offer the bag at him and one of these premier tackles in free agency. I think it's going to come down to who says yes first because he can't strike out. My biggest thing at pick number 4, though, in general, is no matter who they take, if it's all these names, McMillan, Banks, Will Campbell, Abdul Carter, the biggest thing, or Travis Henry, the biggest thing is
Travis who?
did I say
late,
Travis
late.
Hunter? It's late. It's late. Travis Hunter. Whatever name we throw out, the most important thing is don't miss. You got to hit on this pick. So do I care if they take a tackle compared to a wide receiver or to an edge rusher? No. I care about did they get the pick right? In 3 years, is that a blue chip prospect that we can build around with May and Gonzalez and start building a foundation here? So whatever position it is at pick number 4, or if they trade down to pick number 6 or whatever, wherever they pick in the first round, don't miss is the point.
I don't think that they're going to intentionally miss, but
no, obviously they're not going to intentionally miss, but
I'm with you, Fink, that I want them to take Tet McMillan. I think that if we look at the style of play, I mean,
Mike Evans 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, look at Drake May and what he had at North Carolina, and he still excelled. He didn't have an offensive line at North Carolina, but he had weapons. He had Tez Walker his last year. He had Josh Downs, who was a really productive player at North Carolina. He had Omarion Hampton. That's going to be a probably first round, early second round running back pick this year. And so if we're comparing, blocking versus weapons, I want weapons around Drake May because even with this year's offensive line, which we all can agree was horrendous, he was still productive. But he just didn't have anybody to throw the ball to, which ended up with him having 10 interceptions.
I'll add to your point, Nate. There's a graph that comes out after all the games every week, and it's all the quarterbacks and how they rank in plays outside of structure. And Drake May was up there with Lamar and Josh Allen. Their names were all grouped together, head over heels above everyone else in the league. And he did that with the offensive line that we thought would get him killed. And he did that with who was he throwing to? Nobody. You get him people around him. And then obviously the offensive line needs to be addressed, and it will be in some way, shape, or form. But you got to get him people to throw. Like you got to get him someone to get the ball to. And I think Tet is that guy.
And my point to this is we've already seen him come out of the game twice this year with concussions and injuries.
That was neither of which were due to offensive line play, both of which were running plays that he.
But my point
being one game he came back, and the other one he recovered so quick. So it's like,
but how many of those hits will he be able to take? Those hits add up. Like the most important thing for me for the franchise quarterback is to be able to develop and not get hurt.
Yeah, but he could still be playing this year behind the Lions offensive line or the Ravens offensive line and still be smoked on those, QB plays. And so I don't think that you could draft name any offensive lineman that you want to put in there and he's not gonna be able to protect May on the things that make May special, and that's the plays out of structure.
Outside of structure, yeah. I think like he had his moments with very, 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 very average players. Like Hunter Henry, I like Hunter Henry a lot, but Keyshawn Boutte cannot be your number
Ty
one.
Warren. If we could get Ty Warren out of Penn State to couple with Hunter Henry, thank you very much. Big tight end prospect.
There's
Army knife kind of guy.
There's Nate's takes right there. This week's edition, Ty Warren. Tony, cue it up. But I mean, there is just a lot of ways they can go about it. You need weapons, and it's not even that you need it. We haven't had weapons in New England since what, like Gronk? Like, when's the last person you really wanted to see, like, oh, give him the football, something special is going to happen? It was probably Gronk. We haven't had that since.
That one game with Antonio Brown was kind of nice to watch.
Okay, yeah, that was cool too.
Woo.
Yeah,
I was being a little sarcastic. The answer is Gronk, but
yeah.
My one caveat to my pick for Tet at number 4 is the hit rate on first round offensive linemen versus second round wide receivers are drastically different. And so the chances of you succeeding with a second round wide receiver and a first round offensive lineman are far greater than a first round wide receiver and a second round offensive lineman. That's my only caveat. Either way, I think that those are two positions that need to be addressed, probably one of which via free agency and one of which via the draft.
We see them with wide receivers in rounds 2 and later, and they can't hit on anything. The one they did hit on was Malcolm Mitchell, and he got hurt after he was done after a year.
But he also had the injury history coming in, so it wasn't really a surprise.
But they hit on him like he was good.
Oh, he did.
That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying he got hurt here. It's just he's the last productive guy we drafted, and he played a year.
Yeah.
Like, that's the end of the sentence or the end of the story for him.
We got a Super Bowl out of him. He was huge in that 28-3 game, I must admit.
But it's like we haven't hit on any talent outside of like defense in the draft. Like, I don't know.
And I don't even give Wolf credit for drafting Drake May. Everybody in the world knew that if the Bears didn't draft Caleb Williams, if the Commanders didn't draft Jaden Daniels, whoever fell to number 3, the Patriots were picking. Like, any 3 of us could have made it with a blindfold on. I mean, I don't think he gets credit for quote unquote winning that pick.
I also don't think we can crap on the guy for everything that happened. Like, he's a rookie GM that inherited a crappy roster with a rookie head coach. Like, you can't really evaluate the guy. I think maybe after this year is more fair, but if you improve, you're obviously keeping him around. So, like, I think free agency will be a big tell for him.
I mean, he had more experience in player personnel positions than Mayo had at coaching positions. So if we're going to run over Mayo in the blame game, it's only fair that we run over Wolf. He held high-ranking positions in Green Bay and Cleveland before coming here, and was basically the front guy in the player personnel department behind Belichick. As we know, Belichick ran everything. So for a good, I don't know what year specifically he started in Green Bay, but for basically a decade, he was in player personnel departments around the league. So yes, he was technically a rookie GM in that role, but he was a lot more experienced at his role going in than Mayo was at his. So if Mayo is subject to blame, Wolf is even more subject to blame.
Well, it still doesn't change the fact he inherited crap. Like, it's not like absolutely. He can come in and, like, he obviously, like, he was given a bag of crap and was like, hey, make this into diamonds.
But he also was given a boatload of cap space last year too, and
he tried to spend it. Just no one wants to come here. Who would want to come here? Not sure what's happening at QB, rookie head coach. They're awful. Like, I wouldn't. If they gave me $20 million more, I probably wouldn't. Actually, no, I can't say that. If they gave me a little bit more than what the Titans were going to offer me, I'm probably staying in Tennessee. It's a little bit warmer, and at least they kind of have somewhat of an idea what's going on. The Pats, it's like, holy crap.
The only thing that I will, and this is me also living in Massachusetts and knowing the tax structure a little bit too, where they got to deal with the extra taxes in Massachusetts where the millionaire tax. So Calvin really took less up front in Tennessee, yes, but when you take the taxes into account, he was probably actually making more than what he would have in New England. So
also part of that why he didn't sign here was his girlfriend. She wanted to stay in the warm weather, and I'm also glad we didn't sign him because he's awful. I'm glad. I don't want Calvin.
He wasn't great. He wasn't great.
No, like push comes to shove, hindsight being
But it's
2020, they dodged a bullet by not getting Calvin Ridley.
it's like
Absolutely.
it's not like they haven't tried to get people here. Like when Hopkins was a free agent, they went all out. They brought him here. They did everything for him, and ultimately he just decided to not come here. Like guys just don't want to come here. And you can't really put that on Wolf, especially in his first offseason. Now that people get a little taste of Drake May, and hopefully we'll have a coach by free agency, they know that there's like, all right, somewhat of a plan, and hopefully then we can finally try and judge Elliott Wolf. I just think right now it's not really fair to judge him.
And that's where I think that's, again, why I lean Vrabel is you have an experienced head coach that's proven to take. He went to the playoffs 3 of his 6 years in Tennessee. I mean, he is established. He established his culture. He's a defensive guy, so not only does Drake May attract the offensive side of things, but also Vrabel can attract the defensive side of things. I think that there's a lot of promise there, and I really like your call out earlier with the potential of Robert Saleh being on the DC role. So I think that's an excellent call out. Any final thoughts on this episode of that the Patriots can't even tank correctly or they can't tank right before we tease our next episode?
Final thoughts. I'll end it the way I started, that if we're going to dish out the blame, I think of the guys remaining, well, Mayo's not technically remaining, but the guys that were in place for this year, Robert Kraft gets the most blame. But to your point, Fink, just now with Elliott Wolf, you're right. He did inherit crap, but he didn't do much to make that crap better.
What could he have done?
Well, what my point being to this was, I think we went through this whole episode without giving any blame to the guy who does deserve the most of it. And that's the guy that's no longer here down in North Carolina. It's Belichick that deserves the most blame for how this roster turned out. Like, he left the cupboard bare. He, for all those years, said that he did not want to be like his predecessor and his role model of Bill Parcells, his mentor, that when he left, he wanted to make sure it was set up right and it was going to succeed when he was gone, which was the biggest knock on Parcells when he left any place. That Parcells
Belichick
left
did
it
try. He wanted to trade Matt for Baker, and Kraft shot that down. Like, he was trying to do some things.
He also brought in Dumb and Dumber to run the offense, and Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. So like one awesome. Cancels out the other. So if you're telling me to divvy up the blame pie for this season of who was here this season, it's Kraft. If you ask me who gets the most blame overall for this season, he might have been gone for this year, but it's still Belichick. That's my final thought.
Finkel?
I don't know. I don't think I have any final thoughts. I got it all out there, honestly. I think I had a question though, but I wrote it down. Let me get it. Let me pull it up here in the Blueprint Boys chat.
Can I just say, after a year of missteps that I needed this episode of, basically it was for me free therapy. So thank you, boys. I need to get stuff off my chest today. So this was a good platform to do it.
I just hope that they go in to the offseason with a plan, like with a little sense of urgency. I hope they don't sit on their hands. Like, go get your guy, identify your guy. That's your head coach. Go get him. You have a plan for free agency. Like, we want to do this. Would you
call it a blueprint by chance?
Thank you, Nate. I was waiting for someone to jump in there and say that. Obviously, Nick dropped the ball like Aaron Judge in the World Series. Sorry, Yankees fans. Hope you're not watching this anyway. Actually, I hope you are, because we could use the views. But I hope they have a blueprint A and then a blueprint B and hopefully even a C. And if they do pick at 4, I hope it's the best talent available, and I think that would be McMillan. I'd go sign tackles, establish tackles. Like, you can get a good tackle around 3, 4, 5, whatever you can hit. Just go get talent, make Drake May better, and spend some money. I feel like we say that for 2, maybe 3 of the 4 Boston teams we're going to cover. The one team that doesn't Yeah,
We'll
the
spend
one
all
team
the
that
money.
doesn't is the Celtics.
So my final thought before we tease our next episode is, and don't get me wrong, I love my New England Patriots and I love NFL season, but thank God it's over. That was rough.
2
That
years
was
in a
rough.
row.
So thank God it's over. But what's not over is the Boston Banner Blueprint podcast. And so we are going to be talking Red Sox next podcast. Right, boys?
Again.
Yeah, we are. Hopefully there's something that's happened by then.
Last episode, we did a lot of overview. And so next episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper in some potential trade talks, some potential signings. Maybe we'll have some breaking news. We will see. But before anybody exits out of this video, make sure you like, you subscribe, you go follow us on all the socials, Boston Banner BP on Twitter, Boston Banner Blueprint on Facebook and Instagram. Go follow us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And I think that's all I got.
Tell your friends, tag your friends, tell your parents, tell your grandparents. Boston Banner Blueprint is for the kids, for the animals, everyone. Tell everyone.
I was going to say if you're if you're listening to Apple and Spotify, you have an excuse to not know about this. But if you are watching on YouTube, there's no excuse for you missing where to find us. It's been down here on
the entire time
on the ticker. So rewind it if you missed it. You weren't paying attention all episode. It's right there. Go and follow us. All the information is right there.
My last word is sincerely thank you. If you guys listen to our first episode, listen to this far in this episode, seriously, the support is extremely appreciated. We thank you so, so much. Like Finkel said, share with your friends, share with your family. We greatly appreciate it. We hope to keep pushing out some good content for you guys.